Hey guys, by popular demand, I'm going to do my best to keep up doing these videos as preparation for the coming Sunday. I just wanted to say real quick, I thought yesterday was phenomenal. Our first Sunday back, I was blown away. We had 67 people involved in the student ministry between you guys and our students. And it was just incredible from my understanding. All the groups flowed really, really well. You guys did a tremendous job of connecting with your students, and I think that's the most important thing. And I think, again, this week, that's what we need to continue to focus on. Actually, for the first month of these groups, probably even for the first 6 weeks, we need to focus on building those relationships, because as we build those relationships, we'll earn the right to speak more and more truth into our students' lives. This week, we're going to be continuing on our series on Colossians, focusing on this idea of focus. And I just keeping this in front of our students. We live in a world where we are challenged by everything. A fun stat is that the average person sees over 3,000 ads every single day. And every single one of those ads is telling you something that you need to think about, something you need to value, something that should be in power over you, or giving you some kind of message. And so in the midst of all this information, how do we focus? What should we focus on? And we're trying to make the case as leaders that Jesus is not only the thing that we need to focus on, he's not just the person that we need to focus on, but that he is the supreme ruler in our lives. This week, the focus, the main point is that Jesus is the supreme ruler and that he deserves to have all of our worship. He deserves to have all of our attention. He deserves to have all of our focus. And we're going to be in Colossians chapter 1. Once again, the lesson is kind of laid out in 5 basic sections. You have the very beginning point. I would really encourage you to read the overview. I thought that was really helpful for me and the objective, as well as kind of the main point. And there's a line under the main point that says, most students probably agree that Christ lived a perfect life as a man, and that he's also 100% divine, but have your students ever really let the fact go that they can be in relationship with this perfect divine creator? Have you ever let that truth sink in and transform their lives? There's a difference between, and this might be a main point specifically for our high school groups, there's a huge divide between knowing something and knowing something. It's very easy to understand Christ is the ruler of all, and yet that never gets in here, that never transforms here. And that's what we were talking about last week, how the knowledge of God transforms how we live for God. And so I would encourage you, read through that, be prepared for that, but that's going to be the main point, is that Christ is supreme over all of creation. Creation was made for him, and he deserves all of our praise, all of our worship, and what that really looks like. The second part of the lesson is the lead in. Again, kind of like last week, I would suggest maybe come up with your own game. Come up with something that you would enjoy doing. Maybe that's a game of hangman. Maybe that's just sitting around catching up. Maybe that's talking football, shopping. I don't know. Maybe it's talking the election. We'll find out. But find a way to connect. I think that's the main thing. Connect, relationships. By this week, the goal should be for everyone by the end of this week that we know the people's names. This week we'll also be trying to make sure that people check in and get name tags, and so names will be a little bit easier, but try to know your students' names. The main idea that they give is this idea of looking at pictures of creation, and if you look at these pictures of creation, what do they tell you? You can do that. I just don't think that's as effective as really talking with one another, and then maybe just throwing out or posing the question, what part of creation, what part of the natural world is your favorite part and why? Maybe for a kid, he really likes dogs. And for another kid, or maybe for like me, I love mountains. Why mountains? Well, because I just think they're big, they're majestic, they're beautiful. I look at the mountain, it's bigger than me. And shoot, if God made that and the mountain's so much bigger than me, God's bigger than me, it just takes me. Or maybe for you, it's the beach, or maybe it's trees, or whatever it is. You maybe throw that as a lead into the lesson. The third part of the lesson is the main event. This is the teaching portion. We're going to be in Colossians 1, verses 15 through 18. And to summarize, that's going to be covering the idea that Jesus is the firstborn of creation, but that all of creation was made for him. You can point out, as a fun fact, that a lot of other religions and cults will look to this particular passage and they'll say, see, Jesus isn't really God, because it says he was created. It says he was the firstborn of creation. Now, just for your understanding, you may need to explain this specifically high schoolers, the firstborn of creation really is more so of a way of expressing the power and the position that Jesus has in creation, not so much his entrance into creation. The firstborn, Paul is using a reference to, in the Old Testament, firstborns received the majority of the inheritance. Firstborns got most of the blessings. Things were made and life functioned and centered around the firstborn. And so Paul's using that illustration, that analogy, to help these people, the church of Colossae, understand, hey, here's how important Jesus is. He's just as important as the firstborn. And there's some questions about, hey, how would it be fun? Like, what does the firstborn get today? And, we might say, well, the firstborn doesn't get as much, but the baby, they get spoiled rotten, So maybe that's shifted a little bit. But that's where they're going with that. The firstborn of creation means that Jesus, it's all about him. And this passage really does a good job of jumping into the understanding that, man, things were made not just by Jesus, they were made for Jesus. Like when I see sunrises and sunsets, you and I think, wow, that's really beautiful. But like it's for Jesus. It's just to show off for Jesus. The mountains that I enjoy looking at, the beach that we enjoy going to, that was made just because Jesus wanted to showcase his glory. And by us being able to see that, that points us to him. There's a section that talks about being made in the image of the invisible God. And this is really important to communicate, that because we've seen Jesus, we have actually seen God. A side point, if you want to take your students there, is the story of the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus took 3 of his disciples up on this mountaintop and was transfigured literally in front of them. In other words, he showed them, hey, this is what the resurrected, glorified body is going to be. This is what you and I are going to look like. And one of the things I learned in my seminary class, which I think it's just interesting, is that when Jesus took on the form of a man, he took that on not just for his time on earth, not just for those 33 years that he was here on earth from, 0 to 33 AD, but rather that is his form forever. Forever, Jesus is in that bodily form. And I just think that's amazing that he would humble himself in that regard, but yet he is the image of God. If I have seen him, if I have a relationship with him, that means I have a relationship with the God of the universe. And that should just, as I think on that and I meditate on that and I let that just kind of sink in, that should really begin to transform my life. And so you're going to be talking about that in the main lesson. I'll let you read through those. I think there's some really good questions. Read through those. Highlight the ones that you want to answer. One of the good questions I thought was, what are some of the things that seem like they're not under Christ's authority? I think it's good for us to acknowledge, hey, sometimes it seems like God isn't in control, and yet you can still point them to, even though it feels that way, it's not true. There's a difference between how we feel and what's actually happening. The 4th section, the bonus round, the optional activity, I think you should have enough time this week, even middle schoolers, you should be able to jump into this. And I would just be prepared, throw out some of those references, have students look those up, but specifically looking at what does Jesus have authority over? And I think it's cool that those verses point out he has authority over creation, religion, life, sickness, heaven and earth, nature, kingdoms. He has the authority to forgive sins. He has the authority over eternity. So just saying, man, he has authority, and then fixing it and then going, okay, so think about the things that we look to, for example, like entertainment. Entertainment has authority over our lives, but what does it really have the authority to do? It just has the authority to change how we feel as long as we're with it. And then as soon as we're not with it, the authority ceases, right? Our school teachers have authority, right? But they only have authority while we're at school. And so kind of helping them see, like, look, these things that sometimes we look to for authority, they only have authority for a limited time, and yet Jesus has authority over all. And the very last section, the last word, this is kind of that conclusion, that wrap up, that, hey, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to apply this teaching? I think it was, their suggestion was that you would play a song. Middle school students, you're welcome to do that because you have a closed off room. I think you can do that well. High school students, that might be a little bit more difficult, but you can play a song and just have them kind of think, have them meditate. But I would encourage you, lead a discussion on, like, okay, so what are maybe some of the areas in my life that I struggle letting Jesus have the authority over? I know he has the authority over everything, but what are the areas that maybe I'm afraid to let him have authority over? And I would encourage you as leaders that you lead out on this. I'm a big fan of transparency. As you speak and as you share about your own personal life, it's going to open doors for your students to not only ask questions about you, but give them the courage to share out of their own life. And so I think it's good for you to share out of your life. Maybe it's when you were a teen, maybe it's, a couple years ago, maybe it's right now. Hey, here are the things that I wrestle with, giving God the authority, letting him have the authority. I'm being real with you guys. Sometimes some of the things I kind of struggle with, letting God have the final authority, as we're in this new church structure and this new church function and the way that we're trying to organize and staff and lead. Sometimes there are times that I'm like, man, I used to get to make that decision and not have to think about anybody else, just what I wanted to do. And now I got to think about other people. Man, that's kind of hard. And yet God in his sovereignty has said, hey, these are the people that I want to put in authority over you. This is how they believe they need to lead. And can you be faithful to submit to their authority, but ultimately to my authority? And so that's just something that, like, for me, that's something I'm wrestling through, and I'm trying to walk out. And so maybe you've got something in your work or in your life or in your family that you can share. Hey, here's some areas where, man, I want to submit to God's authority. Again, you asked for prayer requests this past week. If you wrote those down, I'd ask people about those. Hey, you guys shared this prayer request? How'd it go this week? And show them that you're following up with that. The last thing before you dismiss, I would encourage you, let them know again and remind them about Operation Christmas Child. This is a tangible way that we're trying to help our students get involved in serving, thinking outside of themselves, specifically our guys. The girls, they'll see the picture of the little kid in another country and they'll be like, oh, I want to pack a box. The guys are like, whatever. Specifically for the guys, challenge them that it is manly to think outside of yourself. It is manly, and it's not that difficult, but it's going to take some effort on their part. But to take a box, start with taking a box, take it home, pack it, bring it back. I encourage you to challenge them on that. And I'll put this in the email, but I'm asking everyone if you could set an alarm on your phone at 12:05. At 12:05, as soon as that alarm goes off, that lets you know you have 5 minutes. I think that might be a little bit more helpful to know, hey, we got to wrap up so that by 12:10, you guys are done. Middle school students, you can begin making your way back over into the student room. High schoolers, hey, at 12:05, I got 5 minutes before people are going to start coming in. And so you can go ahead and begin wrapping up. But I think that'll help us be faithful on on that side of it. And go ahead and come in through the door. Don't wait outside. I apologize about this past week. But I hope this is helpful. And once again, you guys have my cell phone number. You have my email. Let me know how I can help you. But thank you again for investing in the kingdom of God. And I look forward to what God's going to do this week in groups.